you all please stand for the pledge? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. The first portion of our agenda is the opportunity for public comment. We have had no one this evening sign up to make public comment, so we will move right into the report of the secretary. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022.
I'll second, Lisa.
Lisa, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? A lot of material attached to these last minutes.
I didn't find anything.
Yeah.
I didn't look. Which is amazing. It's like several.
Agree, I didn't see anything
Yeah, I
either.
have to admit to not reading it super carefully.
Does anybody need that a minute, or shall we move to a vote? Good. All good? Okay, all in favor? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, thank you. All right, that brings us to the report of the chair. The only item I have on my report is that we did in fact have a town officials meeting on February 9th. We had 3 of us from the board, as well as Ryan and John, and each of the town managers. So we got a chance to meet South Berwick's new town manager, Tim Pellerin. Jen, you were there, and Heather, you were there.
Half the time, half the meeting.
That's right, you didn't have to leave early. Did you want to give a summary, or?
Sure,
Okay.
feel free to chime in if I miss anything.
Will do.
Okay, so we were introduced to Tim Pellerin, who's the new South Berwick town manager, and he just briefly spoke about budget concerns and challenges in South Berwick, staffing issues, and then Mr. Sullivan from Elliott also sort of reflected on they're having the same sort of issues with staffing. And then Mr. Sullivan talked about the marijuana industry in Elliott, talked about the budget, just briefly, the budget committee in Elliott, the 236 rebuild. They are meeting in a first phase of several meetings, and that is relevant to us because it again brought up the light at the high school issue. And so last time we talked about the light, we talked about that there was a traffic study, and really they didn't find that there was any qualifications for a light. And so Mr. Sullivan talked about he would push to sort of revisit that with the DOT, just for what it's worth, and sort of brainstorming any ideas we could have there. Mr. Caverly talked about the diesel bid with Elliott. They usually go in together to get best pricing. Briefly touched on the SOP and masking, just sort of an update, general terms there. And that's pretty much all I have. Did I miss anything?
Can I just add one little quick point? Mr. Pellerin got me really thinking, and so after the meeting, I reached out to Michelle Myers and just wanted to have a conversation about the traffic light in front of the high school, and so I have not heard back at this time, but I will pursue that, just to kind of find out if there's a way that we can work together, and certainly Representative Roberts as well, just to be able to see if there's a way that we can kind of have a unified voice around what's really best for students and the citizens of this community. So
That's a good idea. Yep.
Yeah, one of the things that Mr. Pellerin mentioned when he was talking about that was that there's a push apparently for the DOT to move more of the maintenance responsibility for roads like 236 back to the towns and off the state's hands, which I think he was suggesting may tip the balance in terms of being able to get that done. So that was good. And he also updated that it looks like the light at 236 and 91 is probably going to start this fall.
the fall,
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
That was interesting too.
And it sounded like it was definitively a light. I think at one point there was a conversation whether it was a roundabout or a light, and now it
Yeah.
sounds like it's definitively a light.
That's the impression I got as well.
Yeah.
That's great news.
Okay, thank you, Jen. That concludes the report of the chair and brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Well, thank you very much. My first thing I would like to do is introduce Principal Rob Scully and Renee Doucette, and they're going to talk a little bit about kind of those outdoor experiential learning experiences that are available for some of our students at Marshwood High School. And so I will turn it over to Rob and Renee. Renee is also our gifted and talented teacher at Marshwood High School. She returned to us after being a long-time English teacher. And Mr. Scott Patch is here as well. Perfect. Ms. Scott. So kind of the originator of the whole thing. So you kind of have that matriarchal walk down the stairs, like this is like part of your story. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, that was for effect. So I have the easiest part, just introducing two colleagues who are really committed to an important element of our programming at the high school. Scott, who's been here for a long time and has that historical perspective, and we thank him for all his efforts for establishing that. And quite frankly, Renee, Renee's new to us this year. She's hard at work reinvigorating our gifted and talented program, and on her off time, she's jumping into outdoor education. So I'm really excited to introduce these two to share some of the work that's been done and some plans moving forward.
Well, good evening. I just wanted to start off talking about the history of the program when it first started. And it all came about from the great 5th grade program that you've all endorsed for so many years, our students going to Pinkham Notch. I was able to go with my son when he was in 5th grade. I think it was around 2008, and as a parent chaperone. And I came back and I was talking to Mr. Burnell, and I was like, we got to do something like this at the high school. And I remember being on lunch duty down in the cafeteria, and I blew my whistle and got everybody's attention. I said, how many people here remember your experience at Pinkham Notch? And everybody's hand went up. How many had a good time? Everybody's hand went up. I'm like, yeah, we got to do something. So we started small. Around 2011, it first started. Once we got organized, I had about 6 kids. We just did, I think, 3 local hikes. And the following year, they went out and recruited, and I got a huge influx of kids. And in 2012, applied for an MEF grant. We went to Pinkham Notch on a training trip, and then the kids went for the first time as helpers to the AMC educators. They would work with a specific group of the 5th graders while they were up there. They really, and I told them after that first year, every time we go up there, I said, just be ready, because you're going to be rock stars. When you leave those 5th graders, you're going to get hugs. And I remember after that first year, we went to meet with Mr. Burnell to kind of discuss how it went, if we wanted to continue it. And walking down the hallway with a couple of my students, literally 5th graders were running out of the classroom to come give those kids hugs. So it was pretty powerful. We went to 2013 through 2017, we kept up with the club. And then in talking with Mr. Melhorn, the principal at the time, we wanted to kind of step it up a little bit and offer it as a part of the curriculum in phys ed. And we kept the club aspect going throughout that time, but with all of the emphasis being more on the training of the class was getting more in depth. I started offering students the opportunity to get certified in outdoor wilderness first aid through solo. So I've had probably a handful, maybe 10 to 15 kids in the past few years get certified through solo. And it's grown. This year we were supposed to have 3 sections, but due to the incoming freshman class size. We had to eliminate one of those sections so that it would free me up to teach a PE and health section. So there's a demand there for it, and the kids have really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, as you know, with the pandemic, we haven't been able to do the Pinkham Notch trips. Last year, working again with Mr. Burnell and Ms. Humiston and some of the 5th grade teachers, the high school kids did a replacement 3 days for the 5th graders. We did a day at Vaughan Woods, we did a day at Orrs Falls, and a day at the Highland Farms, hiking out to Folly Pond. So those are 3-day trips, and we did that 3 consecutive days each, every other week or every week. And we're going to do that again since they're not going to be able to go. I've already talked with the 5th grade teachers about trying to set that. We're going to do the same type of format. The high school kids will lead the hikes and get the 5th graders outside for a little bit of some of the outdoor experience as best we can, trying to make it. We won't replace going to Pinkham Notch, but at least we're going to give them something that they'll look forward to. Yeah. So some of these are some of the early pictures. The upper left, that's us up at Mount A. We always ended at Mount A when we were doing our local hikes because it gave us an opportunity to, in the background, we could see Mount Washington, and I would tell the kids in a few days or in a week or so, that's where you're going to be. You're going to be right up next to that mountain. On the upper right, the team building, we were actually waiting for the 5th graders to get there. Actually, I think they're there. They're playing a game on a picnic table. That's one of my early crews. That's the Bossy twins and Alexa Kasuli and some of the others. And the lower left is a hike out on the Page property, which is Bob and Gail Page, South Berk residents. I met with them, must have been, I don't want to say 8 or almost 10 years ago, and they granted us access to use their property, which is right abuts BA. So we have a little hiking trail up there, and what's nice about that is we can meet with the 5th graders right at Great Works and hike out. We don't have to get on a bus and do anything. And we've had night hikes out there. We've had, I talked with the South Berk Fire Department. We got permission to have a little campfire out there one night, and we had some hot chocolate and s'mores with the kids. And the lower right is one of the morning meetings. The high school kids actually sit in on all the meetings that the AMC educators have to plan their hikes and go through the preparation, where they're going to go, what they're going to need. So it gives them that experience of getting prepared for the morning. They have a morning meeting and then an afternoon debrief. And as we got into the outdoor ed stuff, we had a little bit more opportunities working with a colleague, Donnie Gagnon, down at Trape Academy. We did a rock climbing day over at Pawtuckaway. The kids really loved that. We watched Free Solo beforehand, so they were pretty excited to try. We did free solo. We were obviously strapped in and roped up and everything. We're gonna get that there. And then again through Donnie at Trape, I went up with him one weekend, and I helped him certify all the guides that work for some of the companies up on the river there, on the West Branch. And I established a connection with Arthur. He's the gentleman up in the upper right in the middle. He's the owner of the raft company, and he's also in the middle picture. He's the pilot of us, and I'm right next to him as we are the only raft that has ever flipped at the Cribworks. And yeah, so that was an experience that I'm not really excited about doing again. The kids loved it. And yeah, and then there's a shot of us coming down through the Cribworks. Lisa, I think Jack will remember the crib works pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
He was on one of the trips where he went for an early swim and actually swam through that Class 5 rapids without the boat. So that was an experience. So I'll wrap my portion up and I'll turn it over to Renee and she can talk a little bit about her visions. In talking with Mr. Buzzell, my department head, we're looking at or we're considering making outdoor ed a semester-long class, so that would be like a 1A and a 2 versus the year-long class, just basically to provide a little bit more flexibility with scheduling and opportunity for more students to be involved and maybe some of the boat kids that haven't been able to do it because of their restrictions. And we're going to continue our connections with Great Works and in the Pinkham Notch and the high school mentoring opportunities. And we'll see where that goes from here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not a huge microphone fan. Hi. So I'm Renee. I am here as the gifted and talented teacher at the high school. I used to be an English teacher, and when I went with Scott Patch on one of the trips where they trained the high school students. I was a chaperone for one of those trips, and the outdoors has always been something that's been really important to me, and it's super exciting for me to be able to take over Hold, which I officially did in January. And really, when Scott and I collaborated and talked about what we were looking for, we really wanted this to be an opportunity to help connect students with the outdoors before and beyond the class. So knowing that the class can't fit into everybody's schedule, understanding that it may inspire a lot of students to want to get outside, but that we really want to continue developing that relationship with the outdoors and help kids continue to build skills. We really think that the club continues to be very important for the work that we're doing. I've met with the students, and we had kind of like a vision meeting a couple weeks ago, and we started talking about what do they want the club to be. I think it's really important for the ownership to fall on them, and they're really looking for finding their people, right? The other people who love the outdoors, other people that they want to connect with. They also have big visions for the things they'd like to go do. They want to learn new skills. We talked about rock climbing, we talked about rafting, we talked about hiking. They want to hike big mountains, they want to explore trails, and really thinking about ways that I can support them to have safe outdoor experiences with the adult support that they need to be able to build the skills so that they can make that a reality. I've also just gotten us a Teens to Trails membership. Teens to Trails is a nonprofit organization that supports outdoor clubs across the state of Maine. Becoming a member is super cheap. It's $20, and it provides us and connects us to some grant opportunities, access to pre-planned trips, which is amazing. I think that's one of the really difficult parts, like Scott was talking about how he made that rafting trip a reality. That's amazing that he's been able to make those connections, and Teens to Trails partners with other organizations and other nonprofits from around the state to try to get kids into the outdoors more often. They also have resources for clubs, including ways to get like donated gear for schools, because one of the things that's particularly challenging about getting kids into the outdoors in a safe way is making sure that they have the stuff that they need in order to do that, including warm clothes, micro spikes, whatever those things might be. So we're really looking at ways that we can support students in their vision ultimately. Another layer of that is that we have some outdoor classrooms. I know you heard about the Great Works spaces that have been developed and how they've been using those. I'd say we're not quite that far here at the high school. So we had 3 rustic spaces that are developed over the summer through a summer program here. There's definitely room for further development, including some seating and supporting teachers using the space, even if that's like organizing like a shared calendar or something where teachers can like sign out the rooms or whatever. But there's a map that I'll show you. So this gives you like an aerial view, and this was made by Morgan Decker, who's the social worker, one of the social workers at the high school. So she created this map to kind of show the spaces where the outdoor classrooms exist at the high school. Again, some trail work that they've done as well through some summer programming. And one of the things that I've been talking to the Hold students about is how can we be leaders within our own trail communities. One thing that we've talked about is potentially like maintaining some trails, whether that's on school property or whether that's on some local areas, partnering with some organizations that way so that we can lead in the outdoors and become good stewards of the land. But we also have some opportunities for some development of some outdoor opportunities here at the high school too. And I think when Scott and I were talking about like what we envision for the future, one of the things that we had to address was the fact that there are obviously some challenges. Making trips accessible financially for students is definitely a challenge, and coordinating and budgeting for transportation is also really hard for outdoor clubs, you know, depending on the number of students that you have who want to go on these excursions, and then making sure you have access to a bus and a bus driver, and then the funds to be able to pay them. That involves some kind of pre-planning and creative organization as well. And that's something that we definitely know that we need to work on as we continue developing programs here at the high school. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. I was wondering, have you looked into any grants for gear for the club?
Yeah, so Teens to Trails has some grant opportunities that they have connected us with. One of them is Waves, which is a Maine nonprofit. And they're doing currently like $500 mini grants, and I think Scott has done some gear work too. If you want to share about that, sorry, I made that short. I know I can't help it.
Yeah, so I've applied for MEF grants for the transportation and some of the gear. Early on, I did get a grant from Teens to Trails. They offered like a $500 grant startup for clubs. Teens to Trails at the time, they weren't as widespread as they are now. It wasn't really an advantage for us. They did most of their work up in the Brunswick and North area, so they really weren't doing any programs down in the southern end of the state, which was kind of a disadvantage at the time for us. But they're expanding now, so hopefully it'll offer more opportunities.
Yeah, and the Vaughn Fund, I think, is meant for outdoor activities, so that would be something that, you know, I encourage you to tap into. And also Timberland is a local company, very well known. They do lots of grants and opportunities to school districts in the Seacoast area, most specifically. So I would definitely tap into that. And thank you for keeping the club aspect of the program alive. I know it's very important to so many children, and I know like my own children missed Pinkham Notch because of COVID, so there's going to be that whole group of 3 years worth of students that are going to come through and that was something that they were looking forward to their entire school and then weren't able to participate. So this will be wonderful for them as well. To be able to tap into that opportunity. So thanks.
I think it's so great. It gives the kids the experience to get the confidence outside, and they carry that confidence with them through the years. And even with younger kids now, like talking about hiking around the Great Works School, it's one of the top things they talk about. So they have all this to look forward to. I think it's so awesome.
And Mount Monadnock is driving distance, second most climbed mountain in the world.
Wow, I didn't know that. I like that you are considering 2 semesters so that more kids can take advantage. I know that all year-long program meant a lot of kids with other requirements couldn't participate, and I'm really glad to see that that would be more available to more kids. I know Max loved it.
I think with all the talk about mental health and everything as well, getting kids an opportunity to be outside. I have a student who participates in both of these, and it's really been so nice amidst all of this to get outside and just kind of play, even though they're in high school. I think it's great. And thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really
Tremendous.
appreciate that it's a non-competitive
Yes.
way to get outside, be physical and active without it having any pressure other than just that. And
Yep.
connecting with peers, connecting with nature, getting literal feet on the ground, absorbing sunshine and fresh air, especially after these last couple of years. I just can't imagine anything would be more valuable at this point. One of the things that I've really loved about, and I think this is maybe more the class portion than the club portion, but I don't know how it all ties together, is the mentorship aspect. If you separate it into 2 semesters, say Pinkham Notch is going to come back, right? It's coming back at some point. So that's the spring semester, folks would have that opportunity. But how would that work for the first semester? Would there maybe be another mentorship opportunity coming out of that? Or is it the whole year that there's a club, and the club is the one that actually does that? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Excuse me. When Paul Melhorn and I sat down, that was one of the things that we really went back and forth on, was that the attraction of going back to Pinkham Notch, we were trying to figure out how, if we did it as a semester, the kids who took it first semester, would they still be eligible to go if they wanted to go? Usually, the AMC limits the high school participation to about 10 kids, 10 or 12 maybe per trip, depending on the size of the class and how much room they have. So with the other trips that are hopefully going to be continuing, the rafting trip and these type of things, having a big time trip that the kids can go on is I think critical each semester, whether they go to Pinkham Notch or not. But yeah, I would definitely want to look at ways to get the kids to be able to go back up there.
And I need to say, like, one of the things that I just think we can't emphasize enough is just, over the years, Scott's approach to this, and I'm going to talk about Scott's in particular. We have had many conversations on a Sunday afternoon when we're in the wellness center, and many times during COVID, you think about all the reasons why you can't do something. And Scott's mindset has been, how do we do this? And that's a very, very, that's an incredible gift, and I just truly thank you, for your vision of this. You're getting old when I remember the conversation when we talked about the class for the very first time in the Learning Center all those years ago, and so, to see where we are, just your desire to make this happen, and Renee, just so thrilled about the way that we're talking about growing the program and making it something that how do we impact all students and that chance that we can give these kids to have these experiences. So thank you both very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We didn't ask what we can do to support you, but I guess it's kind of clear.
I would love
Send
to
some
see
grant opportunities your way.
grant
Send some ideas.
opportunities, but I would also say this is very much in line with our mission,
Yes, it
and I
is.
would love to encourage the community and the board to consider budgeting for growing this
support
program,
it.
supporting and growing it, for sure.
1,000%, especially to Kate's. And I always go back to Kate because she was like the champion when we were updating the mission to make sure that we had some aspect of stewardship and sustainability and citizenship around environmentalism included in that. And this is just, what could be more?
Well, the awesome thing about this too is it gives them some ownership over their outdoor space, and it makes them want to protect it at a young age, to have the access of knowing that needs to happen. And they can share it with their friends and get them engaged, and it also supports the mission of recycling and protecting the environment and using less, disposable resources. So it really comes full circle.
And I think even on an equally important level is that it allows students to see something bigger than themselves.
Yes.
And what is my part of a whole? How do I make a difference? How do I play it forward? And being able to kind of have that perspective as adults, that's really important to have. And so to be able to use this as an opportunity to teach those skills. And you talk to Jerry, there's a lot of those things that he does inherently. It's not just a bonfire that they're having. There's a lot that goes into that and what that symbolizes. So.
One thing that not to gush all over Scott, I know this is probably super embarrassing with all of us doing this, but Scott has a magical way of connecting with students. And that connection piece, I think, is so huge, and modeling that, and then naturally what happens then is students start connecting, and of course, being outside just, you know, gives itself over to that. But just kudos to you, Scott. I know you made a major, big difference. You have a huge fan. At least one student I know.
Same.
Yeah, very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Next, I just wanted to talk, I received 3 retirements in the last couple of weeks, just really 3 stellar educators. Nancy Mann was a longtime French teacher at Marshall Middle School. She is probably best known for her giraffe that would be at every dance, and people would have to bid to name as part of a fundraiser at the dances, and so those students probably know, I remember that now. And then Mrs. Mann then became the full-time teacher at the high school, and so she'll be drastically missed. She's also the chairperson of our PLCSS, which is basically the group that works to help teachers get certified through the state of Maine. And so if you remember, there's 2 different paths. There's kind of the district's view of the hiring process and rehiring of staff members, and there's also kind of the teacher side of that is helping them get certified. And those are 2 separate kind of pathways, and so Nancy was the chairperson for that for the district, and obviously did a great job in the classroom. Barbara Carey, just a consummate professional educator, worked at Elliott Elementary School for a number of years, is on a part-time basis right now, but will be retiring at the end of this year. And these are all for the end of this year. And then, Sarah Williams, who was a 4th grade teacher at Marshwood Great Works School. Sarah has been just a pillar of that school for a number of years, and to see Sarah moving on to some different opportunities, is very, very sad, but I'm very, very happy for her, as I am for all of the staff members. So just wanted to share that with all of you. Thank you. Next is some COVID updates. I wanted to start off with is that we met last week, or 2 weeks ago, and we really talked about transitioning kind of after break, about how do we get back to some sense of normalcy for students. We went back and looked at the SOP, and so I met twice now with my administrative team. The way that the SOP is written is there's no clear guidelines that we have to change in order to make any of the changes that we're talking about. So there's nothing that says you must do this as part of our plan. It really reflects what the SOP says. So the changes that we're talking about, moving back to the lunchroom, being able to have unassigned seating at the lunch tables, being able to go through the service line, is not tied to the SOP. So all of those things don't require a board vote because the SOP as it stands right now, we're able to do all of that. And so, part of it is a progressive step. And so, for example, it might take a week or 2 for students at Elliott Elementary School to understand how to go through the food line, and you're transitioning from having trays in your classroom to now at Elliott Elementary School they're going to do it this way, or at Central School to start going through the food line again and getting rid of all the styrofoam containers, and then scooping things onto the trays now that they can touch the utensils again. So it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of teach the skills around that. Also to start to use the lunchroom spaces themselves, because we're going to be able to move to kind of that 3-foot distancing piece that was kind of where we want to try to be, but allows us some flexibility to get people in the classroom. And so there's been some feedback from the community that they're ready for that. We've gotten some emails about that, particularly at the elementary schools. Mm-hmm. So from an SOP perspective, we're fine. And so we will continue that, and we'll start that on the 28th when we return from the break, just so everybody's aware of that. The other piece I wanted to mention today was that we have been having some in-depth conversations with the Maine CDC regarding masking. And so today there was an announcement by Dr. Shaw. And really, I want to highlight what was discussed, and then I want to kind of share with the board where my head is right now. So I probably have sent out at least 10 emails in the last week trying to explain to people it's not as easy as sometimes people like to report it in the press. The Department of Education in the state of Maine gives you a version, and then the press has another version. So for example, when we talked about Massachusetts moving away from the school mandate of wearing masks, that was the governor's decision. And so the governor of Massachusetts was able to make that decision. In Maine, what the governor would tell you is that we never had a mandate. Right. And so there's some more detail, the devil's in the details, so to speak. And so what was written into the Maine plan was that here's what all schools must do. And you must contact trace, you must do this, you must do that. And if you mask, you don't have to do these things. And so it was really leveraged into the plan. And so if our plan was to keep students in school and keep them safe, masking was one of those things. And so what was the biggest lever for that was the fact that if you were to mask, this changed back in January, as we kind of talked about, we thought it was the right plan at the wrong time, was the saying that if you were to mask, you no longer needed to contact trace. And so contact tracing is more than just, hey, you were close to somebody, just be aware of it. It was a point where we were saying if you were a close contact and you weren't vaccinated or part of pool testing, you couldn't come to school anymore. And that was for a period of 10 days originally, and that changed to 5 days. What Dr. Shaw talked about today was the removing of contact tracing from the SOP. And that is a light year shift, which is great. And so the SOP has not been updated yet. I don't know how it reads, but in concept, that's coming. And I would expect it within the next couple of days to have that document written up. And so I think from a masking standpoint, that I think we're coming to the end, is how I would phrase it. And so I think that's important just to let everybody know that. And so what does that mean? And so basically, the tides are turning when it comes to this now. And so we right now have a universal masking mandate because of what the SOP, the way that that's written. We can then consider changing that once the SOP, we have clarity around that. And so I think what the Maine Department of Education and Maine CDC is saying is, they would like to see a change happen. My goal, my dream, if it were to be safe and we have the backing to this, I would love to see, that March 7th date be a time that we can really dive into this conversation and not talk about masks if it's deemed to be safe. And that really seems to be what Dr. Shaw was leading towards. But there's a little bit of an obstacle. One is that the SOP hasn't been updated yet, so we don't know how it all ties together. And then the other piece is that as we come back from breaks, we've seen, the data speaks for itself, the rise in case rates as we return from breaks. And so I know that this is a conversation that the board wants to have. I'm just trying to give you the facts. And so where my mind goes is that I would really like to be able to have this conversation when we return from break, to be able to figure out where we're at and give ourselves 2 days of data or 3 days of data to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think that would be really important. I think we would all agree that there comes a point in time, and I don't want to be political, I'm just going to be philosophical, that people need to be able to make a decision.
Yep.
And so I think that's what we need to do. I think we have to navigate kind of the returning from school for those 2 or 3 days that we come back, and then be able to have a much deeper conversation. With that being said, what I would like to propose to the board, and then obviously allow you to talk about it, would be that if the CDC on the federal level or the state level change their language from recommend to optional mask use, that I be given permission to make that change within the district. And so why is that important? Because technically the way that it's written right now is that we would need a board vote to make that change. And so it would be really difficult to do that tonight because I don't know what the SOP says right now.
Right.
But if the CDC, let me put it this way, I have no faith that next week when everybody's on break that all of a sudden there's a change that's going to come.
Yeah.
If there's a change, I think that our goal has been to keep people safe. We are going to follow what we were told to do with the CDC, but if they change their stance, I would like to be able to have the flexibility to make that decision. And so our narrative all along has been that we were going to follow what the SOP tells us to do, and so this falls in line with that. If at that point when we get back from break, if that hasn't happened, then I think we need to have a conversation as a district to say, where do we go from here? And I open it up to all of you and I wanted to kind of give you a nutshell. The only other thing I just want to add is that it's important to pull out on the bus. So busing is very, very different. So the federal busing transportation mandate, that we have no control over that I think the word they like to use is sunsets on the 18th of March.
Yep.
And so I don't know what's going to happen with that, but no matter what we do, we don't control that. So there could be a world where we would say masks are optional in schools, but you would have to wear a mask on the bus. It could also be a world where masks wouldn't necessarily be required on the buses, but we may have masking in the schools. And so I just think they're two separate things, and I think it gets confusing a little bit sometimes, but I do want to kind of put that conversation out to the board. And look, I've heard, 5 weeks ago I sat here and said, gosh darn it, we're going to do everything we can to do is keep kids in school, and this is what we're doing, and this is why we're able to do that. That pendulum has swung. So when I was having that conversation, I heard a great deal about you know, how we should be out of school and how, you know, they're really kind of a sense of opinion on this side. And now the pendulum is swung to the other way of people saying it's time, you know, and when you start to see states, Connecticut and Massachusetts start to follow suit, you know, there's a pendulum shift. And so for every move, there's going to be people who may not be happy with the decision, you know, but I think we just need to be able to keep kind of the medical piece in mind. But I also think that philosophically, this is a bigger conversation. That's why I want to bring it to the board this evening.
Yeah. Thank you. So I wanted to add a couple of things. So first of all, one thing I heard, I listened to Dr. Shah this afternoon when he spoke in his press conference. He did stress that the Maine CDC is continuing for the time being to recommend, not to mandate, but to recommend that schools have mandatory masking. And he suggested that would likely change once they've had a chance to look at the data from coming back from the break. So that's another reason for us to have this teed up for that time frame. There was something else I wanted to say about something that you just said. So there was the recommendation, the masks. Yeah,
The busing?
I've lost it. But anybody else on the board have thoughts about this? I mean, this feels like the door is open now, and to mix metaphors, the light at the end of the tunnel is shining through the door now. I think we're coming up. The numbers are all trending in the right direction. I think we're coming up on a time when we can safely consider that it's time to look at mask optional.
Can I throw one caveat out?
Sure.
Just for clarity, the way that it was explained to me today, the mask optional piece would be in place with the exception of students who are coming back from testing positive from COVID 5 days previous.
Right.
And so if a student were to return, they would have a choice. They could either wear a mask and come back days 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or if they chose not to wear a mask, they would not come back until that window was expired. So like even though it's a mask optional piece, I think it's important just to note that.
Yes.
I think from another side to this is that we did this at recess. We did this a little while ago at recess, and I just think it's very interesting that it's not at recess that everybody has a mask off. I just want to be really clear. Like people, you know, students make their choice. I mean, it might be their parents are telling them what to do, but it isn't just everybody's doing one thing, everything's doing the other. There are kids that are all over the place, and their families are all over the place, but I think they've managed it fine, you know, and so I just think I just want you to know, you know, I think there was really some concerns that kids were going to feel isolated because they were the only ones wearing the mask, and that is not what we're seeing by any means. So, and it might also be that it's been 10 degrees outside. I'm not a fool, but you know, but at the same time, but it is.
They do very well as face warmers, that's true.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that's an important part too, to mention as well.
Can I just bring up one thing that I think we should all just like think about as we, you know, move into the February break, is that you know, the whole, if you test positive for COVID 5 days out, like I did a home experiment with one of my kids who had COVID, and I was testing at home despite my medical professionals that were telling me not to, because it just makes you crazy after a while. But even like day 7 and 8, you know, my child was still shedding virus and testing positive. And if I chose to keep him home to not spread it. But if I did not test, I wouldn't have known. He was still shedding virus and is possibly spreading it. And if I sent him back on day 5 to school, he could have spread it to everyone if he wasn't wearing a mask. So it's just something to consider at like the time frame that kids stay home if they do test positive. And I just think we really should think about that, because it hit me hard.
Yes.
When I experienced it myself.
And thank you for mentioning that, Heather, because I would say the vast majority of parents have taken that same approach of just to err on the side of caution.
Keep them home for the 10
and have
days.
students stay home.
Yeah.
And those absences would be excused?
Those absences would all be excused.
Continue to be excused.
And I will say that our schools have worked really hard to try to make those students, when they come back, not feel as though they stand out. And so, like, you know, so part of the manipulation that we're trying to do in the lunchroom is trying to find a situation where we don't create, like, that's the COVID table type of mindset. So we've worked very, very hard at that, and so there is some counterintuitive parts to it. But you're 100% right, Heather.
I think I wonder if one of the upsides to all of this will be, you know, I went to the airport recently, and I thought, I would not wear a mask anymore. I don't know if the person next to me has a cold or what. Every single time I used to fly, and I used to fly a lot, I would come home sick. The circulation in the plane, the close lines in the security line in the airports, I mean, it's bound to happen. I will never, and you know how I feel about masks. You know, I made it very clear. However, there's a time and a place for a mask. If you are sick, if you have symptoms of any kind, testing positive, not testing, I don't care, that might be an opportunity to do the right thing, to take care of yourself and other people. If you can't stay home, at least throw a mask on. Or if you don't fall into the category where positive or this or maybe contact, doesn't matter. If you're sick, stay home and put a mask on.
Yep.
And I guess what I'm asking is that, so if in the event, in the next 2 weeks, there is a change with the CDC, I'm looking for some guidance from the board, that if the CDC guidelines do change to the term masks optional, which really for us, as we've kind of said, signifies, you know, that's we're going to follow that professional advice, that I would be then able to discuss with the district or let the district know kind of our next step. Right. That would be my question.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other question I would have is that, you know, for our community members, I know people feel passionately about this on one side or the other. I know it. I mean, look, I've lived this for 700 days trying to manage this. I mean, that's a long, long time. And I am asking for those people who would love for me to say right now, do it today, I'm asking for some patience for the next 4 or 5 days, school days that we're talking about. You know, we have the break in there, and I know that may not, meet everybody's needs, but I'm trying to find, you know, the right path. I'm trying to, you know, but at the same time, I am cognizant of that we do have data that is concerning. Do I expect the data in February vacation to be as bad as in the past? I do not. I don't think it will be as bad, because I think, you know, the last month has been such a, but I mean, who am I? I don't know. But I just, you know, so I'm just asking that we're mindful of it.
Yep.
But the moment that we hear from the professionals, I would like to have, you know, the blessing of the board to say, this is what we do, and if over February vacation the federal CDC says we're going to make this change, you know, then we, you know, we strongly consider that. So I just wanted to put that out.
Yeah, I frankly, based on the tenor of the remarks that were made at Dr. Shah's press conference today, I don't think anybody at the state level is expecting that the federal government will do that between now and say, the middle of our break. The conversation was more around when we get back from break and we have our good numbers, do we go and take a state-level conversation that may be against the current masks are strongly recommended?
I'm not sure from the conversation that I had today that there is some wonder whether the national CDC will act before the state does. Yeah. You know, and so that may, I don't know, that could, sometimes they, you know, they don't know ahead of time. Sometimes they find out when everybody else finds out. So
right.
I am not changing the narrative around trying to be safe. I want to be really clear about that.
Yes.
But I am saying, like, if we've put our stake in these people to be the experts, if the experts are telling us this,
Right.
you know, I think that's the place that we want to be. Now that, again, it's a mask optional environment. The other thing that I was told was said, and I'm not an expert, but you know, that, you know, wearing the KN95 masks, people who are concerned in a kind of a non-mask required environment, you know, that really, if you're vaccinated, and that gives you, you know, a great deal of coverage.
Right.
You know, and so, so I know there's going to be people who are concerned on the other side as well.
Well, I think there's been some good data lately that if you were wearing like the KN94 mask, which you provided to all the teachers, right?
I provide 50 masks to every staff member.
That those protect the wearer as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not in the situation we were 2 years ago. People now have options to protect themselves. There's vaccinations, there's boosters, there's masks that protect the wearer. It used to be, my mask protects you, your mask protects me. Well, now you can wear a mask that protects yourself.
Yes.
So I think we've come a long way in terms of, you know, which makes it easier to make this optional.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That's a really good point. I have a question about timing. We have board meetings every 2 weeks. If it happened that things didn't line up with a board meeting for us to make a vote or whatever, would there be an opportunity to not have to wait 2 full weeks and we could do an emergency meeting or something to make a call?
100%.
Okay,
We could
100%.
awesome.
100% we can do that.
Yep.
Good.
And if you would feel more comfortable than that, then kind of if the CDC changes the rules, giving me that blessing to kind of share that with the board, we certainly can do that. That's up to you. I just want to, I want to put that out to
Oh,
the.
to be able to vote right now to say you have the.
Well, we don't, you're saying we don't need to vote if the CDC,
The SOP, the way the so here's the downfall. If the state SOP changes, we've been clear with that. I think
We
we
don't need to
just
vote.
announced it.
Yeah.
That what would be the curveball would be that if the federal CDC changes prior to the state CDC changing.
Oh, I
Right.
see.
And so I think, that would be, that's the differentiator. And one could happen before the other.
Okay.
And so, I think the way that we've approached it is that, and I'm sure it's a matter of timing. I think, from my understanding is that there is a question being asked at the state level. So I just, I'm not trying to be reckless. I'm just trying to be mindful of where we're at. I'm trying to be mindful that this is a positive thing. But really for me, and I've tried to explain this in numerous emails and correspondence, and sometimes it's difficult, is that with the masking piece, let's just take safety out of it for a moment. That the idea that wearing masks keeps kids in school, that is a fact when it comes to the way the SOP was written. And so now that is taken away from the SOP, it drastically changes the conversation.
Yes.
And so now it's a question of, now it slowly becomes that safety question. And clearly what Dr. Shaw, I think, was trying to allude to is that this is coming. The hesitancy right now is just waiting to see what happens after that February break for a few days to be able to collect some data.
Yes.
And then their intention is to meet and make that decision.
Yep.
I guess what I'm asking is that makes sense to me, but I also want to be mindful of the fact that if the federal CDC gives nationwide guidance, do we follow that guidance at that time?
Yeah.
That's I guess, ultimately is the question.
To your earlier point, though, we have 5 school days between now and our next board meeting.
That's correct. That is correct.
Yeah, I guess my point, my sense is that if we were to be in a 1 or 2 school day situation where we were still wearing masks when the federal CDC had already said, we can make them optional now. It's not the end of the world.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's 2 days different.
Yeah.
right. But I think it's important that we sort of put a tight timeline on it. Like,
Yes.
it's one thing to say 2 days, it's another
Yes.
thing to say,
2 weeks.
well,
or a month.
if we're expecting to see an uptick in cases, my concern is that we will see that uptick, and
Yeah.
then that pushes the line out, how far? What are we comfortable with?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because if we look at the data, it's gonna take, like last time, it might take 3 weeks. We might keep seeing a rise in cases. It might not be the 3
Yeah.
days. And so it keeps pushing the line out, and at what point do we say, okay, now we're comfortable? Or do we just, I hate to say rip the Band-Aid off, but I think there's some level of ripping the Band-Aid off
Sure.
here.
I mean, March 18th is an example of that, right?
100%.
There's no indication that the federal ban on traveling without a mask in public transportation is going to get renewed. It looks like that's just going to be allowed to sunset, as John said. So,
Right.
And I'm just going to share my thoughts, and this is your decision.
Please.
I think, for me, philosophically, I would like to be able to say to the community, these are the 2 conditions that we need to see, and if we see these 2 conditions, this is how we're going to react. What I don't want to have happen is this feeling like, okay, we're going to talk about it, and as to Jen's point, that it belabors the conversation.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I think the safety is the federal and state CDCs, they are the experts.
Yep.
That's who we've deemed the experts. And so, however we do it, I just want to be mindful that, that it could, on Monday of next week, they could say, this is what we're going to do.
Yep.
But I think in fairness for the community, I think it's important that they know where we are. It's not, this is a big moment in time for a lot of people. And so the irony of ironies is that, this announcement comes out at 2:00, we've got a board meeting at 7, and we've got to be able to process this.
Yep.
I think we've got to be wise to here are some facts that we've seen. But at the same time, if these conditions have changed to the point where at the federal level or the state level, they say, let's make a change, do you feel like that you want to then hold an emergency board meeting to be able to have that conversation at that time? Or do you feel comfortable saying, if the federal or state CDC says this is how we would like to proceed? That is totally up to you.
so we've said all along as a board, and correct me if any of you think I'm wrong, that in terms of the safety, in terms of the masks or no, we were going by the recommendation of the state CDC, which currently sits at recommend masks mandatory. If that changes in the next week, which again, I didn't hear Dr. Shah say anything other than he wants to see the data coming out of the vacation. But if it does change within the next week, I would assume as a board, and again,
Yeah, we would go with
that
the
we would
change.
go with, okay, recommendation from the CDC is masks optional, we should go masks optional.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I support that, but I also think that there should be some sort of contingency situation with testing, because I believe testing is free now with health insurance, I think,
Can
right?
I share that with you? I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Yep. So I have a kind of a list of the summarize what was talked about today. And so here's the big idea, is that the Maine CDC is expanding access and encouraging all families to take advantage of free testing kits that are available to all Maine families. Testing before returning to school after vacation is recommended. So if we want to stop a spike after vacation, please test in order to avoid that. That's the idea, right? Further information on how to get testing kits will be mailed, will be sent out by the state. So
Yes.
that's coming out. So that's one piece. So that, to your point, 100% have it like that. So that used to be targeted to communities that had high transmission rates. Now they're making it available to everybody. The second part is they use the word uncoupling. So they're uncoupling the contact tracing from the masking. So that's part of what's happening. The next one is basically the 5 to 10 day window that we talked about already is going to stay in place, even if there is the uncoupling.
So can we choose the 10-day or to test negative before sending a kid back if no one has
But
masks?
people could test negative for weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is
and
no,
positive for weeks.
so we asked that question
Yeah.
originally, if after day 5, could we ask them to test, and if they were not shedding, then to come back, and they said no, they have to, this is the minimum that they, so we have said 5 days, that's what the SOP has said, 5 days, but the testing, they don't allow us to do anything with the testing, because that was the way we wanted to go originally. We were told no. The Maine CDC is carefully monitoring federal CDC's words on multiple changes to masking recommendations in the school setting. So they're keeping an ear tuned to what's going on at the federal level, but there's no guarantee that they're going to know ahead of time. Again, the federal transportation part is separate, and that's the 18th is the sunset on that. And then the pool testing, particularly if we're moving away from the mask mandates, they feel is still very, very valuable, so they're going to keep that in place. And so that ongoing pool testing is going to remain, and we're testing right around 1,000 people every week for that, just so people know. So,
What is the purpose of the pool testing, though? Because originally, the pool testing was set up to keep, so that kids could play sports. The reason that we adopted the pool testing was not so much a surveillance. Really, this is going to pick up positive cases and probably vaccinated kids who probably aren't actually shedding enough. So we're going to see an uptick in of positive cases, many of those kids who are going to be asymptomatic, and it doesn't pay off now to keep kids in sports or keep kids in school.
so that's, I think, the tricky part with this SOP is that as you start to wean off of things, the value, right? And I'm using and sometimes it gets tricky because the value isn't, there's the common safety piece, and I'm going to take that out of it for a second because I don't ever want to lose sight of that, but it does get a little bit more convoluted. The value to pool testing was if you pooled, this is to my example of the fish hooks. If you pool tested, it allowed you to continue to stay in school and avoid being in close contact.
Right.
Like there was this, if you did this, you got this rather than if you didn't do this. And so
Right.
it was almost like, you
had
know,
to do it.
I'm not going to tell you you can't go on a date, but I'm not going to give you any money, I'm not going to give you the keys to the car, and then you have to be home at a certain time, and then you're going to have a lot of chores when you get home. The message is, you
You're
kind of
not going-
can't go on the date, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you you can't go on the date, right? So that's that was the analogy that another superintendent used, and that made sense. And so now that same conversation now is going to masking. Because the way the SOP, this is what I don't know yet, and this is what I have to wait to read the SOP in more detail. But the question is going to be, what is the benefit to anybody with the masking? And I'm going to take the safety conversation out of it for a moment. So Now, as it's written today, it avoids the contact tracing. That, once that's removed, how is the SOP gonna, so that is the same conversation. And so, and again, I'm not trying to make light of the safety thing. I will stand by anybody's criticism that we have done everything that we can do to create the safest environment possible. We have done the social distancing, we have done the pool testing, we have been universally masking, we have, upgraded our air exchange systems. Like, so I take that very seriously. That's a non-negotiable to me. But this conversation now is evolving, and so I think that's part of what we're talking about right now.
Right.
The challenge is gonna be, do we, ultimately, if something were to happen, do we wait for the state of Maine, or do we, if the federal CDC speaks first, do we follow the federal CDC? That's gonna be the question. And that may be a matter of a day. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I just want to clarify, so they're taking away the contact tracing part of it. So the pool, I'm with Jen, like, what is the point of the pool test?
Right.
I think,
It's work for our nurses, it's time out for students, it's anxiety provoking at this point for students who basically know there's 3 in the pool and I've been called down to retest. And I'm fully vaccinated and boosted and still am being called down.
Yeah.
And yes, we could find a positive, but the likelihood of that student actually shedding enough to set off a
Is pretty low.
catastrophic
Well,
thing
and
in the
Could
school.
they could just have had COVID, but
they
gone
wouldn't
through
be
their
tested,
quarantine and they're
they would
back.
be, there's
No,
like a
but they
90-day
could have
window
not
when they
known
would
it.
not be part of the
Okay.
pool. So pool testing is an
They've been
optional thing that
asymptomatic.
parents opt in for. We
Yeah.
don't put anybody in pool testing, I want to be
Right.
clear. And so if parents, when we have had parents who have opted out and said, I don't see the value of keeping my child in the pool testing going forward. What the state is saying is that they do see value in the program. And I think it's more so as a preventative measure that if someone were positive, to be able to have them out of the school setting if they were positive. I think that's the idea. But from a singular parent perspective, I certainly understand the questions that are being asked.
And you don't know if that person was asymptomatic positive
Right.
2 weeks ago and they're
Exactly.
still testing positive, but they're not really shedding virus.
Yes.
That
So,
was
yeah.
what
The
I was saying.
data shows they're
yeah.
shedding in the first 2 days.
That's
Yeah.
In
it.
the first couple days,
That's
right.
Right.
That's
Right.
it.
They
Yeah.
may still test positive, but they're not shedding enough to
Right.
make their
They're not
classroom
shedding
safe.
enough.
Yeah.
They could test positive, not shedding enough to be contagious.
Well, and
Yeah.
by the time the results get back, it's not really,
Right.
Especially if they're
Right.
on
My
that
concern with the
Valid
pool test,
information.
keeping
There's
the
such a
pool
big
testing
delay.
is that we're gonna see numbers that are gonna
Yeah.
be misleading as far as safety. Like, there's gonna show that we've got a bunch of kids back from the pool, but it's actually not a safety issue because
Right.
those kids were asymptomatic and already positive or whatever, so.
I'm going to
Yeah.
speak on behalf of some of the other parents out there that it's a safety blanket. And there is a large population that want the pool testing, so I feel like we can't take that away until for next school year, because there's so much change going on, the parents are stressed, and they want their kids safe, and if that is the one thing that they have that makes them feel comfortable and safe for sending their kid to school, then heck, let them have it. That's all I have to say about that.
And that definitely is voices that I've heard as well.
Sure.
Is that, there is no harm in the effect that there are still people who are interested. If we only had 100 people that were, like, I think there comes a point where I would come to you and say, look, we were at our max, and I'm gonna make up a number. We were at 1,200 tests a week. We are now down to 300. Do we want to continue this program? That would be a question that we could have. But right now, we are losing people, but I think that there's no harm in it right now from, I think was what they're saying, and it does create some comfort for people. So
And it does help us keep our finger on the pulse of what's going
Sure.
on. I mean, symptomatic or whatever, they're still positive, so.
there is, and again, I'm just going to give you the whole view, is there is concerns, though, that the pool testing, I would say back in October, November, we could really count on if we pool tested on Monday, that we'd get the results back by Wednesday. If we did it on Tuesday, we'd get them back by Thursday. There's been a couple of weeks, we haven't not got them, but there's been a couple snow days when we have 5 nurses standing outside Central School calling parents and saying, there was a positive in the pool, please come by and we'll test you right in the car right now. I mean, there's been days like that, I'm not gonna lie to you. So I think they've tried to handle that a little bit from a kind of more of the company, that's the company side issue, not our issue, because we're still doing what we've always done, but, so that's, I think, why they want to keep the pool testing. So my sense is right now, from all of you, is that you would much rather have an emergency meeting if something were to change and have the discussion at that time. That's what it sounds like, so, because that's really our choices. We could say, we're not gonna do anything till the next board meeting. We could say, John, if either one of these two things happen, you have the green light to make this decision, or John, if something happens, why don't we hold an emergency board meeting? And I'll have to get into what the proper notification for that is as far as timing goes, but that could mean that we meet on a Sunday night, I don't know. But I'd like to get, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this is where we're at now.
Right.
But what about so there's state and federal, so even if something comes out, it might be a couple days for the federal, so what's the point? Why don't we just meet when we meet?
Well, because it could be more than that.
Oh, it could be.
The federal seems to lag quite a bit.
Yeah.
Federal CDC is much slower to respond in a lot of cases.
And in fairness, I think there's, with the pandemic, there has been people who have been on one side and another side, right? There's been people who are like, I am adamantly opposed to masks from Jump Street, and there's other people who are saying that you're not doing enough just wearing masks, right? And so then you've got the people in the middle. And so I think that there's a large group of people who feel like the time has come. And so I think as much clarity as we can provide the public, I think that they would appreciate that. I think it's important that they understand that this isn't, and I'm not saying this, but we're not just talking the talk, that we understand we're at that moment in time.
Yes.
And so I think there needs to be some type of associated action steps to say, if this happens, there's people who, if you ask them today, I don't want my child to wear a mask for another second in those schools. And I'm not saying that we're going to ever be able to please everybody. That's not my point. But I do think that people at this point want clarity, and that was what we really pleaded with Dr. Shaw. Like how many times have I said to you, I would love to be able to say to people, what does the exit strategy look like? Just tell us what has to happen.
Yeah, right.
I even said, you know what? Draw a line in the sand and say, and we're not there now because it's too late for that now. But March 17th. This is what we're going to do, and people can make a decision at that point in time, And so I think, this is a little bit different, but I just want to make sure that we're all, ultimately, this is a big step. There's going to be people on either side who are going to be for this or against this.
Yep.
I think the safety part is it has to come from the CDC part, and then I think, just how quickly do we want to react to that is really the question.
And you're talking about the national CDC initiative?
My gut feeling.
It's not happening.
No, my gut feeling is the opposite, and
Yeah.
I'm totally wrong.
It will be
Okay.
the CDC. Yeah, it
You're
will be
waiting
the
for the
state.
state, yeah,
I think the state is going to be behind the federal.
And then
okay.
That's my gut feeling.
to be, consistent, this board is constituted because of state law. We are a state
Right,
entity, right?
that's true.
So the state is
Yes.
where we ought to be
We
looking to
have
get the guidance.
That's right, that's
I mean, I'm
correct.
comfortable if they change it, that we say,
Yep.
according to this, we're okay with it
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
board. I have no problem with that.
I feel, I was just gonna say that, yeah, I mean, John, I think you have a
Yeah.
good sense of where we are, and we've been talking about this for 2 years. I think you
Yeah.
know more about it than anybody, and I trust your judgment. You're all about keeping kids safe, but
And
if there's an opportunity to have a little bit more flexibility and
Yeah.
not,
So I think what we're saying is, if
Mhm.
the main CDC says between now and our next meeting, we're now recommending masks optional, then we ought to go ahead
I
and
think so
implement it.
too.
Okay.
I mean, the reality is,
Yeah.
kids
Is that a
are
vote?
Seeing a lot
still
of nodding.
10
We have to
times
vote
more
on-
likely to die in a car accident
Yeah.
or of homicide
Right.
or of suicide than they are of COVID.
Yes, right.
Realities, yeah.
So, I have to game plan in my brain, so
Sure.
just bear with me.
Yes.
So the curveball may come that in Wednesday of next week, we get a notice that the federal CDC has said, we're changing the language. And so I just wanted, that's going to be, and the beauty is that we do have time because school doesn't start back up into that point in time. And so then, I will certainly, as soon as I hear anything, I can let you know, but that would be the fly in the ointment.
Yep.
Because they are going to meet, it's simple if Maine's ahead of it. I do not get the sense from, and I don't know, but from what I was told today, I do not get the sense that the Maine CDC has any inclination to make any changes until after they get the data back from, we come back from school.
Okay.
I do not get the sense at the federal level they have that same clock in their head. That's gonna be
Yeah.
the, you know, so.
And it's also a very real possibility that we could get back and neither has said anything.
That's
I
100%.
think that's
Yes.
equally as likely that we get
Yeah.
back and neither has said
I think
anything.
that's most likely, frankly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
There-
but if the SOP has changed, so the CDC recommendation hasn't changed from state or federal at that time, but the SOP language has changed, then is it more up to a board decision at that point?
It can be, right?
Well, it can be up to a board decision at any point, right, ultimately. But I think it's important to point out that although it may say a Maine Department of Education standard operating procedures, that is clearly the CDC giving what the recommendations are.
Right.
And so the SOP, I cannot
I mean, the SOP language could be changed tomorrow, but the CDC recommendation might not come out.
the
follow.
SOP would not change to contradict the CDC. The CDC recommendations is going to dictate the language in the
Okay.
SOP. It's,
Okay.
you know, that's, you know,
good.
that's very clear.
Okay.
Because I asked that question about 3 months ago, like, wait a second, why is the Maine Department of Education doing this? And really the answer was, in conjunction with, you know, so.
Okay. Okay.
It feels like a lot right now, but I think it's a positive
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
reality.
It is hopeful.
You know,
Very hopeful.
March 13th will be 2 years that we have had to manage
Yeah.
a global pandemic. You know, and I just think that this is a wonderful moment to be able to start to think about maybe what this looks like. I think the only hesitancy that I have is that we also went through what we went through last summer, where we thought we were in that, and then all of a sudden to put that, I'm gonna use the toothpaste back in the tube, genie back in the bottle, however you want to say it, is a really tricky.
That was hard.
And so I just want to make sure that, you know, if I were in your shoes and in my recommendation, I would not feel comfortable till I saw the numbers after break.
Yeah.
If we were to deviate from what the SOP says.
Yep.
And that would be a discussion that we would have at a board meeting to say, look, this is what the data is telling us right now.
I think
So,
that's right.
but the variable is if something changes between now and then. So, I mean, I clearly understand where we're at, and we will go forward unless
And
I'm.
if there's no data
Well, they
and no
break the
drop
date-
of recommended to optional by our next board meeting, we're once again in wait mode.
I think that's will be that conversation.
And I
mean,
think to Jen's point, it's like, okay, so we could, you know, let's be thinking about that and what
Yeah.
that means for us
Yeah.
at the next board meeting.
And that's why, you know, part of me feels like if the let's just say on Sunday night, if the federal CDC said, this is what we're going to do, whatever that may be, are we going to wait for the bureaucracy of the Maine CDC to catch up with that before we do something, or are we going to respond to the federal? And so what we're saying right now is that we're going to wait until the Maine catches up.
Yeah.
The issue might be of timing, and then I think at that point in time, if there was a desire to have a meeting, I could certainly reach out to Joe and say,
Yes.
Joe, here's the situation. You know, it may be wise to be able to hold a meeting
Sure,
so that we can discuss this.
Yeah,
agreed.
I would not be comfortable basing the decision on the federal CDC when the Maine CDC hasn't caught up yet, unless we had a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we were able to see the data county by county, right?
Well, yeah, the only curveball, you know, and again, I just, you know, 5-day incubation period. So we have students returning to school on, so here's an important part. The testing part, you know, coming back from break would be great. I mean, that takes a lot of the variables out of it. But if, you know, it may, you know, we may not have enough data in 3 days, you
Right.
know, and so, you know, so I mean, as I said, that's why, you know, I started this saying, my dream, my vision, if things are safe, and I think that's part of what the CDC has to determine for us, is that March 7th would be a great date to hope for.
Oh, that's a good.
And that's how I
Fair enough.
look at it. That gives it 5 days of data that, you know,
That's
that gives
plenty of
us.
time to get to that.
And I think that's really where Dr. Shaw was leaning today. It did make it a little bit more interesting though when the contact tracing was separated out. And I don't know what that looks like yet. So I really
Right.
can't respond to that at this point, so.
Well, I was thinking that, you know, the main, so for example, if the federal policy changed, but the Maine had not caught up yet, but we're able to see that, you know, York County, or we're able to break that down, those numbers very specifically, versus northern counties might be very different, which might impact the Maine decision on that language. Do we have the option to take the federal rules and our numbers and make our own decision on that?
100%. And I don't think, again, let's just say hypothetically if the federal changed. And I don't know if it's going, I'm just saying hypothetically.
Right, yeah.
Certainly, I would start making some phone calls. I'm sure we would meet as a group of superintendents to say, all right, what does this mean? Let's talk to the Maine CDC. I would be able to gather some information to kind of find it, because I can't imagine with that type of pressure that it's not just a matter of time for Maine to fall in with the rest of it. Like, I can't imagine that would be an issue, particularly with our data being so positive. And then you can see, I mean, we've gone from, I think we had a couple of days where we had close to 40 people that we were identifying cases on the day. I think yesterday we had one case, and today we had three.
Yeah.
Tomorrow might be more because the pool testing may come back, but I mean, but it's not. We're not talking about 40 right now,
Right.
And so there is some data that we can use. So what I just so I'm 100% clear is that if this Maine State CDC makes a change, then I will inform the district that we are going to follow that. If the federal makes the change prior to that, I will certainly confer with the superintendents. I will confer with the Maine CDC to be able to understand on how to interpret that, and then if need be, in timing, we're right, then I would ask that I would speak to Joe and consider whether or not we have an emergency meeting.
Yep.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect.
And I don't mean to put anybody on the spot. I'm just I want to put the facts out there just because I think it's important to be as transparent as we possibly can.
Yep.
So, okay.
Can I just finish that by saying thank you to the whole board for a really robust discussion on this topic? That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I really want to give Annabelle a great deal of credit. And Annabelle kind of approached me a couple of 3 weeks ago and said, Mr. Carribley, have you ever considered asking the board if they would like to include their pronouns on their name placards? And so if that's something someone has an interest in, please let me know. I will ask Elaine to be able to have the placards modified to include your pronouns. I think it's just important that people have that individual choice if they'd like to do that. Please let me know, and then I would certainly make those changes. Okay?
Thank you.
And then just kind of some school news. Central School, we're doing some Olympic units, which was kind of fun to see. They're also doing some snowshoeing for all grade levels, which is always fun. Elliott Elementary School recently celebrated Crazy Hair Day, and then the Golden Group Award, which I'm not really sure what that is. Sounds exciting though. Marshall Great Works School, the Love to Read Day, which is going to be February 18th. And then Marshall Middle School are in the midst of Spirit Week, and then Marshall High School is in the midst of Winter Carnival. So I had an opportunity to see a beautiful photo of kids human curling today, so I'm sure Rob will share a little bit of what that looked like from the perspective of the high school. And that concludes my report. Annabelle?
Hello. Trevor is not with us tonight, so I will be doing the sports report. But first, I'll start with the other side of things. GSA is currently working on a presentation to bring to the middle school in order to give upcoming freshmen an opportunity to see the school and meet some GSA members, as well as learn about experiences that members of the LGBTQ community at Marsh would have. Yearbook is under full construction finally after having some time off from getting things going. Order forms to purchase yearbook are due at the end of March, and you can find that order form in your email. Hawk Block last week, students were given an opportunity to learn about some significant Black historical figures in honor of Black History Month. That was very fun. My advisory watched several videos. It was great. And Winter Carnival is occurring this week. There have been dress-up days. Today, students competed in Olympics, like human curling, paper snowball fights, speed skating, and there was an ice hockey shootout. That was very fun. It was a great raise of morale, and I've heard a lot of good positive feedback from that. Students in Mr. Abrahamson's class have been 3D printing new name placards for teachers to go outside of their classroom, and it's a cool addition to each room. And now for sports. Boys, oh, and I forgot to mention, Mr. Edgar is going to Costa Rica in February of 2023, and those interested can reach out to him. Sports, boys ice hockey won 2-1 against Mount Ararat on Saturday. Their record is 7-8-1. Haley Pruitt, Lydia Phipps, and Quinn McGuire all placed in the top 3 in their respective giant slaloms at their last ski meet. Haley Pruitt got first, Lydia Phipps got third, and Quinn McGuire got second in the boys. On February 10th, girls hoops beat Westbrook 54-50, and tonight they played and won their first round of playoffs, 49-36.
Nice.
And Mr. Gratian asked me to share that Jonah Noble, Jr., was accepted to the District 1 Honors Jazz Festival the other day.
Very cool.
Fantastic.
That is all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And can I just add one other note that I just, we have been working really, really hard on the childhood immunization collection. And so we had a pretty extensive list of people that we were working with. We've got that list down to a really small number now, which is really good, but there is a point we've kind of drawn the line in the sand is that Monday the 28th is that day that if people don't have it, they will not be able to attend school. I want to just be really clear that if you receive feedback from the community, that is a state law, has nothing to do with COVID-19. It's about childhood immunizations. We at this point in time have reached out over a dozen times to every family that has not responded to us at this point. And so, and the key is making that personal contact to say, let's make a plan right now so we can avoid this.
Yes.
So we've done that with everybody.
Okay.
There's been a couple people that we have not heard from. And we've left numerous messages, and so I've asked the principals at this point in time now to step in with those final few and help the nurses be able to have that communication. So it's something that, as you know, I didn't want to really think about during the pandemic. We've been able to do that, but there is a point now where we have to say enough is enough.
Yep.
And we've really tried to be accommodating, but we're at that point now.
Does DCYF get involved at a certain point?
No, they are just forced to homeschool. And so the interesting part is that we don't offer it, but even if we did, remote option would not be okay because it's to attend school, and that would be counting as towards me attending school. So.
Right.
So I just want you to be aware of that. So we're we started off with a list huge, and we're really down to the last little bit right now. So I feel really good about the work that Judy and our nurses have done.
Great.
They've been fantastic. So sorry, thank you.
Thank you. We have received no new correspondence in the past 2 weeks upon which to report. That brings us then to the report of the committees, and the first one up is Finance and Facilities, which met at 6:30 this evening. We spent a decent amount of the time talking about a pretty substantial facility update, so we didn't spend too much time on the numbers. I'll do a quick summary on that. Basically, expenditures, revenues, and budget are all very, very close to each other, and we're tracking. We have a good general fund cash balance. We're in the right position in terms of spend down of the budget with regard to what's left for the rest of the year. Federal grants are still coming in. Adult education and school nutrition are still in the positive. So the budget looks like it's in good shape. Who wants to give the facility update?
I can.
Go ahead, Heather.
So the windows at Marshwood Middle School are going to be replaced. For the most part, I think there's like a $100K estimate for the windows in total. 2 rooms have been done. There's going to be plans to do the upstairs windows as well. So hopefully we can get all of that done by summer of 2022. The leach field, there's some issues over at Elliott Elementary School, so we're getting quotes for that. It's going to be a pricey endeavor. The gym roof at the Elliott Elementary School needs to be replaced. It's old, but also there's some rocks, huge rocks that have been thrown up there over the years, which didn't do any good to the roof on the gym. But again, it's very old. The unit ventilator at Central Elementary School keeps on freezing up, so there's going to be some I guess it's frequently repaired, so I think that they're working on maybe replacing that in the future soon. Paving at Marshwood Great Works School, it's about a $100,000 project, which will need to be done soon. And then the LED lighting, a follow-up from our conversation at last meeting. Marshwood High School, looks like it's recommended that we replace the outdoor lighting, the gym lighting, foyer, and a foyer at the cafeteria, and that's going to be roughly $40,000 to $50,000. Obviously, all of these items that need to be done on the facilities are being affected by inflation and the cost of, obviously the cost of maintenance and product. In terms of the transportation, we are looking to get another bus, but there's no rush in ordering that, so we'll wait until after the budget is sorted. It's about 12 months if we ordered a bus today for us to receive it. So, but we're not in a rush because we're pretty great on buses in terms of our cycle and purchasing. And then in terms of food service update, we're working with Chartwells on an audit issue, which will result in a federal finding on our food service program. There was a discrepancy of how many meals were served by Chartwell. However, it was their mistake, their issue. They will have to pay the fine in terms of that being resolved. And then there are 2 interviews scheduled for tomorrow afternoon for the 2 food service options that we have. Done.
Thank you very much. One thing I would add, and I probably should have said this when we were talking about the numbers, it now appears we did the paperwork to have a loan available to us, a line of credit, in case we got behind in our cash flow, and it now appears as though we're not going to need to exercise that,
Correct.
which was good news.
Yeah.
I would just add that I appreciated Mr. Caverly's comment during the meeting that we are really focusing on moving from a reactive to a proactive approach to facility management, and I think that's really huge. I didn't know if you wanted to just touch on that at all.
Yeah, I think so. So we're really trying to, with our budget season, to dig into our facilities and trying to avoid the bigger problems from happening, and how do we do preventative maintenance to be able to save money in the long term. And so the example that I think is always easiest to use is the paving. So there's that fine line of where you have to totally reclaim a parking lot, which typically doubles the cost, whereas if we can do it a little bit earlier and skim coat it with an inch of asphalt, that really saves us about, in the case of Great Works School, it could save us upwards of $100,000. It's just a matter of timing. And so really trying to get into some cycles and being able to denote money every year that we know that we're either going to have to pave every year or we're going to have to seal parking lots every year. So let's put money aside to know that we're going to have to do that to keep the maintenance up on those things to avoid the big problems. We're going to have to do work on roofs on a regular basis. So we have to kind of create that rotation of, every year we're going to do this work in these buildings, and really trying to come up with a sustainable plan to be able to manage those big ticket items. Something like the septic system, that's a little bit harder to kind of be able to plan for. But
Sure.
But if there's one of those things, it's much easier to manage than if there's 6 of those things.
Right.
So the other idea is that, with the mold situation at Marshwood Middle School, we got some pretty clear feedback on what caused that. So what can we do to prevent that going forward, so we don't have to deal with that in any buildings in the district going forward? So we're just trying to change our focus a little bit. So, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Ed policy, it looks like also met today, is that right? Yes, good.
Yep.
Okay, can we have a report out on that?
I'm happy to do it unless you're jumping
Go
the
for it.
Okay. So we met today. We're bringing nothing forward tonight for first reading, but we did discuss JLCB and JLCB-R, which pertains to the immunization of students that we talked about. So because there was that law change in September that everybody needs to be up to date, we need to bring the policy in alignment with that. And then there's several forms that also needed to be updated as well. So those will be coming maybe at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then we talked about the booster group, JJIBC. which pertain to booster groups. And there's some procedures that go with that as well. And there was a subgroup that was formed to really take a little bit of a deeper look into the policy and what changes needed to be made, what was working. And it looks like the district policy is in pretty good shape, but there were some changes that need to be made, so that will be coming soon as well. And then we talked about JFAA, which talks about the admission of resident students and transfer of homeschool students, and also that will be coming at a later date. And then ACAC, which was about service animals in school, and we'll save that for the next meeting, but we just briefly touched on, we'll be looking at it the next meeting.
Okay.
I think that was most of it, yeah.
Is that it?
I think so. Did we talk about the bus drivers too, right? Remove those from the decision on the stops and defer that to transportation director?
Yes.
And to
EA.
remove the radio stations from the notification.
Yes.
The snow call lists, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Got it.
And those will be coming later as well.
So the days of sitting in front of the radio waiting to hear what your
Waiting to
school
hear
is
your
called, those are few and far between now, so,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Thank you.
I know, I think our kids would get up earlier to see if there was a snow day.
And as you said, we have a couple of second readings on our agenda
Yes.
for later. Good, okay. Wellness, SEL, next meets on March 2nd, right? So no report
Yeah.
tonight?
Mhm.
Okay. And I mentioned this last time, and there's been a little bit of email traffic on this around another suggestion or two for slicking up the board portion of the website, but we'll close out this advisory committee shortly. Okay. That brings us to new business. May I have a motion, please, to approve the second reading of JLCC?
I move we approve the second reading and discussion of policy JLCC, communicable infectious diseases.
I'll second, Jen.
Jen, thank you. Comments or questions? No changes since last time we read this? Okay. All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you very much. Have a motion, please, around JFAA.
I move to approve the second reading and discussion of policy JFAA, admission of resident students.
I'll second, Kate.
Any discussion on that?
Can I just share, I know that Jen mentioned some work we did on JFAA, and so some of the changes were around our tuitioning of students in, and so we wanted to make sure we changed some language around that, and we also wanted to change the registration process. We're going to an online registration process where we centralize people, and so we wanted to make sure that the policy showed that. And so even though the main policy is going to be voted on this evening, there are some subsections that we'll be voting on
We'll
in a
bring
couple of
forward
weeks.
again,
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other comments or questions?
Well,
All
I'm
in
gonna-
favor?
I'm going to be nitpicky.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Second paragraph, last line, we're saying above parents or guardians and where they legally reside. In that last sentence, it only says parent or their parent, where parent maintains the home. I believe that should be or guardian.
Correct.
Good call.
Okay, so adding the words "or guardian" after the word
I
parent.
believe so,
Yeah.
Before the phrase "maintains a home."
yes.
Yep.
Elaine, can you make sure you make note of that for Therese, please? Thank you.
That's a good catch.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
very good.
Anything else? Okay, with that change, all in favor? That is 6-0, thank you very much. And the last piece of new business has to do with an overnight trip. May I have a motion on that, please?
I move we approve an MHS request for an overnight trip and transportation for 7 students to attend the Thomas Cup occurring on March 18th and 19th, 2022 at Thomas College in Waterville, Maine.
I'll second, Jen.
Jen, thank you.
What is that?
Yes, John, would you mind?
Oh, there it is, I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, I can let.
I had to look it up online, yeah.
So a lot of it is STEM related, but I'll have Rob be able to explain it to you a little bit greater detail. But I do want to say that just so everybody knows, before anything like this goes on the agenda,
Right at the back.
we make sure we vet it with the school nurses
Of
just
course.
because there's some clear COVID protocols. I think there's a good sign that more of these things are coming, and I think that, that we've want to be mindful of that, but I also think that we need to be clear that there are certain guidelines that we have to continue to follow. And so, for example, a question was asked about taking a different trip and just saying that if you're going to do that, we still need to follow the masking mandate on transportation, like in buses or vans if we're taking those, and just those types of things. So we're making sure we're staying true to our SOP. But I do think that it's a great thing that we're starting to be able to talk about doing these things again.
Yes,
So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Rob, can you kind of share a little bit of the background on the Thomas Cup? Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I don't know if you want to transition into the principal's update too, it's part of what I
Just
was
do the
gonna-
Thomas Cup first, and then we'll
Yeah,
vote, and then we
Thomas
can
Cup,
do your other.
It's really just, as John mentioned, it's a STEM innovation competition. So they'll head up on Friday after school, and it's kind of like an all-nighter, and they get challenged a little bit like Odyssey of the Mind or that element. And there's different innovations, and it's a group of 7. Last year it was virtual. We had one student who ended up coming in, I think, 5th out of 300, and it's just something that we're really trying to get into the student experience now through the curriculum, adding a few more classes. And this is something that Gretchen Nelson, who teaches our intro to the computer science class, has been promoting. But it really was a student who looked into it and found it. So they'll head up Friday, and then they'll have all night different challenges in the STEM environment, and then they'll have mid-morning. There's awards. There's chance for scholarships, up to $10,000 worth of scholarships. So it's really something that we're excited about being part of.
Thank you for that.
That's great, thank
Sure.
you.
Questions or comments?
I think it's great.
Love it.
All in favor? 6-0, thank you. That concludes the new business portion of our agenda and brings us to the building administrator's check-in. Rob, did you want to just stay
Now
where
you
you
can
were?
I wanted to make it official. I apologize, I forgot you have to vote on it. So nice to see everyone tonight. I'll try to keep it brief, and there's a few things I'll just add some more context to that already were spoken about tonight. But something that I think goes under the radar relative to our teaching and learning is the investment and attention that we're making to our technology. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that. Crystal Villamere, she's a tech integrator at the high school level, and we met about a month and a half ago, and we talked about what the pandemic has initiated for a lot of teachers is discovery of different apps and different technologies. So we're trying to get our hands around and be a little bit more planful and systematic about it. So Chris is here every Friday, and teachers are setting up time with her to work on some of the integration. The Google Suite is something that we've committed to curate the curriculum, and the students are familiar with it. But it also has opened up a lot of other opportunities, but especially around formative assessment. So teachers are working hard to discover new tools, and Chris is working with us. So from the teaching and learning, I just wanted that, because that sometimes can go under the radar. Just highlight a couple important dates. We'll have parent-teacher conferences, March 2nd and March 10th. As far as I know, I think the spring edition is a relatively new development over the last couple years, and that was something that came out of our leadership group, thinking we usually had a check-in at the beginning of the year and then didn't connect. So it was maybe a little bit pandemic inspired, so we're happy to keep that. They will be virtual, but I think it is meaningful now that we're about 3 weeks into second semester, and we really like the idea because some classes are semester-based classes, so you never would have had a chance to connect with the teacher. So those are coming up, the 2nd and the 10th. We'll also start course registration, and I mention that because it's been really impacted by the pandemic the last few years, and our first pandemic year. We were doing master schedules in August still, as we were managing 10 people in a classroom and a different teaching load. So we're really excited about getting back on track with the pre-pandemic timeline. So Course registration will start in March. We're excited because we are resurrecting like in-person visits. Our counselors will go to the middle school as part of the process, and that transition has really been important to us. Our department leaders are coordinating with the middle school teachers to give some context to the courses. And as I said, the goal is to return to the pre-pandemic timeline of schedules before the end of the year, which leads us to another exciting thing that we're going to start discussing is the return of Step-Up Day, and again, that transition. And then also, to some degree, taking that model and applying it to the parents, like a parent-type Step-Up Day. It's been a long time since some folks who have students here might not have even had a chance to enter a building. So we're going to be talking about having, almost something like a parent Step-Up Day. Whether that's in August, right before school starts, and it's a nice way to end the summer and come in and you'll go through your child's schedule. And we've been coordinated with the middle school in some of those early conversations. And then, as I said quickly, just some reinforcing some things that have been mentioned in the student agency realm. Our civil rights group and our GSA group have been doing a lot of work, and if you have a chance to walk around the school, really it's around, building empathy and awareness programs and just a lot of signage and a lot of engagement and building capacity within those groups. So if you have a chance, kind of walk around the school. The other thing I know it's important to the board and the students and the teachers as well, the recycling program, resurrecting some of the clubs and combining with the student green team. Again, that focuses awareness campaign, specifically targeting probably food waste first, and so we're excited. We have a meeting right after break to get all the stakeholders involved, from Mr. Bourbon all the way down to all the way across the board to our student leaders in that realm. We are still looking for a faculty advisor, and we've got some interested people in that. The only other thing I'll mention is that the Winter Carnival Week, I think, is a nice indication of where we're heading toward that Hawk Block, the original spirit of Hawk Block, and that was really fun. The Thomas College trip that we did mention, I'll put it under this lens. It's a field trip, but it also is an indication of some of those little hacks and that design thinking we've been doing. It's a brand new class that initiated an interest that's probably going to grow into an after-school club that now has, folks looking to go into competition. So that's it. I just wanted to put it under that lens because it's a field trip, but it's also an extension out of some of that design thinking that we've been doing over the last couple of years. And I just want to say thanks to Renee and Scott for their presentation, because I think that's also another indication of some of that design thinking that's being done in the midst of this pandemic. And by that I mean there's strategic intent about how we're going to schedule it going forward to increase access, extends from the classroom and curriculum, the beyond classroom, the club, but also last year's SEL summer programming is where those trails were starting to be cut in. And so, as I said, I just think it has a nice, cohesiveness to the work that we're trying to do. And the partnership that Renee mentioned, the Teens to Trails, that's going to be a really important element going forward, are all the different partnerships we're trying to create. And as I said, it's just a little breath of fresh air to be able to think about those type of things and to, start doing some innovation and creative thinking around student experiences. And the conversation that happened tonight, I think, inspires that even further, if it physically can feel a little bit more freeing. So I'm happy to report the rest of the year on some of the other hacks that are being done out there around the student experience. So.
Thank you for your update. There are lots of great things going on in the high school, and I know at the beginning you had mentioned, the spring conferences, and I'll speak on behalf of me, myself, and some other parents that, we appreciate having that opportunity to meet with teachers in the spring, and having that option, because there was a couple of options. I don't remember if it was for the middle school or the high school, but that's super helpful because I know a parent of 3 kids in the district, from pre-K on, there's usually nothing or very little written on the report card in terms of feedback.
Yeah.
So I think that the spring parent conferences are probably very well valued by others because of that missing piece.
Great.
So thank you.
Oh, great, thanks.
And that changed 3 years ago, that the high school did not used to offer spring conferences.
Oh.
So that's a change, that's a recent change. Yep.
Good, good.
Thanks,
you.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Exciting.
I've got one more thing after David.
I feel like I went to spring conferences. I feel like I did go to spring conferences.
Good evening. As always, thanks for the opportunity to share with you some things that are happening at the middle school. As I mentioned the last time I was here, I'd like to start with some recognition and shout-outs, and I think a lot of people would already mention, Superintendent Caverly mentioned, we have Spirit Week this week, and it's really I think it's a cool piece of the experience at the middle school that our student council, led by Advisor Stephanie Thompson, has created. Each day is a different theme. When they come into school and see students and staff dressed up, Character Hero Day, Twin Day, Summer Day, tomorrow's a Wacky Hair Day, which I'm not allowed to participate in, but Friday is Hot Pride Day, and then we're going to finish the day with a school-wide bingo. So really appreciate Stephanie Thompson and the students who are organizing this, because I think, it's February and it's cold, and it's a perfect time for us to have some fun incorporated into our day. Also, it was really great to see, hopefully some of you got a chance to go to, based on the works of Dr. Seussical Jr., was held last weekend. A great shout out to Director Sharon Arsenault, Assistant Director Seamus Burke, and the cast of Seussical Jr. It was a great performance. I saw it Friday night. They had a performance Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday night, and the kids did a wonderful job. But as watching them, not only did they do a great job, but they just seemed to really have pure fun. There's joy up there when they're participating in this, and that's just wonderful to see. As Rob had mentioned, we're working really hard for our upcoming conferences, and we're also talking about the course registration process. But what I think is great value for the community and for you to know is that we're working really closely with the Great Works School. I met with Jerry to talk about the transition for 5th graders and the different things we're going to do to make 5th graders feel very comfortable when they transition and come up to the middle school, but also for the teachers who are making those recommendations and for the parents whose children are going to be moving from one school to the next. And we've also been working with Rob in the high school on the same premise. So we're hoping that when we get back to a sense of normalcy, that there's going to be opportunities throughout each school year for students to come up and spend time in those schools throughout the year, and not just have one step-up day, but give them a chance to come up and maybe be mentored by some of the other students that are there, and just create that kind of transition or that bond for those students so they feel very comfortable when they eventually do move to that school. Speaking of parent-teacher conferences, we'll have ours on March 3rd and March 8th from 3 to 6:30. That communication was sent out earlier this week, and so it's going to be virtual, but parents have the opportunity to meet in person if they'd like. And on March 9th, Wednesday, we're going to be having an ALICE information night. I know Superintendent Caverly has shared with you the ALICE training that a number of teachers and administrators and local first responders went through this last summer. We're going to be having a parent information night where we're going to have Elliott Elementary School Principal Peter Harrison, Elliott Police Sergeant Ronald Lund, and myself providing some information in the form of a video that was a part of the training we received, and answering questions about what ALICE is going to potentially look like in our schools for the upcoming year. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Oh, Mr. Creech, I wanted to say thank you very much on behalf of the South Berwick Rec Department, for your assistance in the Gunstock ski trip. You're very organized, procedural, and it really, and your presence just at the dismissal was the best, and I've been doing it for years, the best that I've ever seen. And we all appreciated it greatly as adults chaperoning the program, but also I felt like it left, the students got on the bus in an orderly way, and there was no chaos, and it just made for a great trip. And that makes me feel hopeful that in the future, there can be more field trips within the middle school because of your organization. So thank you so much.
I absolutely just have to say how much I love the mentoring idea and having the kids come up to the different schools from the other ones and be mentored by the other kids. I think that just has so many benefits and so much opportunity in so many different levels and ways. So I just think that's genius. I can't wait to see how that goes.
So two just quick pieces. David mentioned it, but we have, we met numerous times about Alice, and we had kind of said to families that we were going to have this conversation. So we are doing the Marshwood High School, Marshwood Great Works School, and Central School. So we did it by community because we felt like there might be a parent at Central School who might actually want to see what the high school, like what the difference is. They're going to see the full scope of the program. And so we're going to offer that on March 7th, and these are going to be in person. And so March 7th for high school, Great Works School, Central School, and then as David alluded to, March 9th at Marshwood Middle School with Elliott Elementary School in person. And so this is an opportunity to kind of learn about the program more. I just want to be able to kind of remind people that we can't go into this is what we do in every situation, right? That's part of a crisis plan, is to make sure that we keep that, private, just to make, we'll tell you what it entails, but we don't broadcast that because of obviously don't want necessarily people to know how we're necessarily going to respond in our patterns. So that's one part. I did just want to mention one other part that we've talked about a little bit, but we have engaged a consultant to look at student services. And so we spend a great deal of time working with our high school student services. We've done faculty input groups, we've done parent input groups, and we've done student input groups. We also met and decided that we were going to pull in the middle school component and try to talk to middle school parents about the transition to Marshwood High School, and also students about the transition to Marshwood High School, to be able to gather that data. We're going to be able to share that, kind of a summary of that report, hopefully in April is when I talk to the person who's doing that work for us, but this kind of that big picture of where we are with our school counseling, student services department, that's all part of this. And so the transitions is a big part of that conversation. So just to make you aware that it has kind of expanded a little bit. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Board members, any last thoughts?
I just wanted to share a little story. I'll keep it quick. I know everyone's tired, but it's a little fun fact. So our very own Lori McPherson is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have a special connection to it, so I'm just so proud and excited. And here we are in the era of equity conversations and all of it. So when I was a freshman in high school, I was on her very first cheerleading squad. And at that time, she was still in college. She didn't even have a job yet. Her first job was at Central School. I'll never forget it, which was the 5th grade at that time. Yeah. And we knew as cheerleaders that it was very athletic and very challenging, and yet at the time there wasn't the same respect for the cheerleading as a sport. I don't even think it was maybe recognized as a sport at the time. And Lori went to bat, and not only did she get our trophies in the same case as the football team, but even beyond that, she developed the competition side of the cheerleading squad. So originally, before she had main stars and all of that, we had a separate competition team, and you had to cheer on either football or basketball to be on it, but it was a separate thing. So competitive, athletic, all of the things. And she fought for and got us the recognition. So she has been a cheerleading coach for, I don't want to count the years, because that's going to make me sound really old.
1987 was her first
but
year.
a long time, and has developed the Main Stars program, and has probably, I can't even imagine the thousands and thousands of kids that she has coached, not just from our school, but from other schools. And she just got, what is the association?
She was elected to the Maine Sports Hall of Fame.
Maine Sports Hall of Fame.
So,
she just got the award, and she is the first cheerleading coach to receive that honor in the state.
And also Rod Watton, the former football coach at Marshwood, was voted in this year as well.
Yes, he was. Yes.
So a little
Big Pride, Hawk Pride.
Yeah,
right
it's a
now.
little
Hawk
funny
Pride.
story. So Lori started cheerleading coaching in 1987, and I believe that was the first year they held a state championship. And I actually cheered at that state championship in Orono, so I had kind of known Lori's kind of reputation through that. So a little known fact that was I was not a basketball player. So anyway, anyway, thank you.
That's awesome. That's a nice share. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for that.
That's great.
May I have a motion to adjourn then?
I move to adjourn.
Second, Heather?
Kate and Heather, all in favor? That is 6-0, and we are adjourned. Thank you very